I get to welcome into the studio the fabulous Stephen Paul. Fabulous because you've made my life so much more interesting because I have used your beverage on occasion, and apparently people find me more interesting when they've had a couple. But you are with Hamilton Distilleries?
Yep, Hamilton Distillers, and we've kind of branded ourselves as Whiskey Del Bac.
Which, if you're not familiar, is brewed right here in distilled. I guess it's not brewed. I keep saying
distilled. We actually have to make a beer, and then we distill that beer into whiskey.
Is that normally how whiskey is made?
That's how it's done. Yeah, okay. And so one of our people, Jana, actually likes to say that whiskey is what beer wants to be when it grows up.
I'm sure I've seen her wear that T-shirt at some point too. Right. But I guess how long has Whiskey Del Bac been out there?
So we actually, our daughter Amanda and I founded the company in 2011.
Okay.
Or so, and we finally took product to the local Tucson marketplace in about late 12 or early 13.
Okay.
And then we got funding to do the system we have now in 2014.
Okay, so let's take a few steps back, because I know you said everyone's probably heard the origin story, but it's a good story. But your background is actually in like furniture, right? Or
yeah, I mean, I've done a lot of things, but yeah, my wife and I had a furniture design company for 30 years that specialized in mesquite wood, actually, and that business kind of grew out of a sense of place as well, much like the distillery did. Early on as a furniture designer, I realized that you had to, if you wanted spectacular grain, you had to go to rainforest woods. I didn't really like doing that. I did it a few times, but then I realized there was this beautifully grained wood growing all around us in the Sonoran desert, and so we really started to focus on mesquite in that furniture.
So are you from Tucson?
I moved here when I was 11.
Okay.
From a hotter desert than this, Palm Springs.
Oh, my.
Yeah.
And so you moved here when you were 11. Has this been home since then?
Yes, it has. Okay. Love it. I love this place.
And so you grew up with these mesquite trees all around you, and at some point realized, hey, we could probably use this to be more sustainable in our furniture making. Is that kind of how it works out?
Yeah, I mean, rain, as most people know, we're losing rainforest rapidly, and so anyway, yeah, and mesquite is a limited resource as well, but it's not being just wholesale raised, bulldozed. So anyway, yeah, it's a pretty sustainable resource and quite beautiful. Very difficult to work, but it generates a lot of scrap because there's a lot of flaws in it. It doesn't like to grow straight. So
dare it.
I know.
How dare one take its own path?
Right. So yeah, long tabletops are a challenge. You can get them, but in boards long. But anyway, but I used to take my scraps home to barbecue with, and I'd sometimes I'd look at my wife and I'd go, "Those are our profits going up in smoke, Elaine." And one night we're drinking scotch and barbecuing. This is in 2006. And she goes, "Why couldn't you dry malt over a mesquite fire instead of a peat fire, like they do in Scotland?" And you may know, but peat. So when you dry malt over peat, it gives the whiskey a very unique flavor. And so knowing what mesquite does to food when you cook over it, that's why Elaine had this idea. Okay. I've always called her Idea Woman. She keeps them coming.
That's fantastic. It's always good in relationships to have an idea person and then someone that can execute that idea.
Yeah.
I've been around, I've got ideas, and when I'm in with an idea partner, we just spin around in circles on the ideas.
Absolutely.
So I guess before we get too much into the production, were you the first or one of the first then to use mesquite for distilling?
As far as we know, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so so there's a few distilleries in the country now that do use mesquited, not peated, we like to say, malt, but none of them malt their own barley. And so two of them are in Texas. One of them is in Santa Fe, and they're making really good single malt whiskey. They're sourcing their malt though, so we're the only one that we know of. I'm sure we're the only one that malts our own barley
Okay.
and dries it over mesquite.
And you're gonna have to help me out a little bit here. So barley, do you grow barley? Is that
No, we don't. Early on we had two local farmers try to grow out two-row barley for us. Turns out, turns out two-row barley likes to grow at higher elevations or higher latitudes, and so neither one of the farmers got the yield they needed, and so we source our barley from southern Colorado.
okay?
It's about 7,500 feet above sea level up in Alamosa.
Okay. And I'm getting this lesson here, so I'm wondering, back in 2006, were you fully aware of the altitudes and the areas in which barley grew, or is this something that you've kind of learned along the way?
Tom, I knew nothing. I knew I liked single malt whiskey.
Elaine's like, I have an idea, and you're like, well, I guess I'm going to learn about it from now.
No, I was totally naive about all of it. So no, it was a steep learning curve. I knew nothing about malting or distilling, marketing. Marketing whiskey anyway. We could market furniture, but not whiskey.
So I guess I'm just dumbfounded how you get from this idea. Like, what's the first step? You're like, okay, well, instead of barbecuing food, we're gonna make whiskey. Is that, and then you just go down that path, or do you meet people that are making whiskey and say, hey, can I sell you some? Like, how do you get there?
Well, first I did a bunch of reading.
Okay.
And then I made a lot of really bad whiskey. That was key. And hopefully you learn from that. And then I did attend a week-long, after I had been distilling for a while, I attended a week-long distilling workshop put on by the American Distilling Institute in Petaluma. And then, got good enough to have it marketable, drinkable.
Okay.
And then, and then a few years later, I hired distillers that were better than me. And so that's been key to success as well.
And at what point do you go from like a hobbyist? Did you know from the beginning that this was going to be a commercial product, or were you just trying to make something that you could enjoy?
Well, that was my first motive. It's something that, I just wanted to see if we could make a single malt whiskey that was truly from the Sonoran Desert. I had no goal of making any money or taking it nationally or anything like that. I just wanted to see if this idea worked. So then we got investment. Once it started, being passably drinkable. First of all, I was doing it illegally, and then when our daughter moved back from New York, she realized I was at that point making passably drinkable whiskey, but
you
illegally.
were a bootlegger.
Yeah,
you were a bootlegger.
So she made me get legal. She helped me found the company. So we formed a little LLC. But then when we got investment, it kind of changes things. Like, then you've got to step up. People have expectations after they give you money.
Those things are a killer. They're like, oh, it's no longer just about what's fun.
Right.
Let's fast forward then a little bit to where we are now. You've got a fairly sizable facility, and you're making more than just this original sort of flavor of whiskey, or what's the?
Yes,
you got different varieties.
We do. So the brainchild of the whole project turned out to be what we call our Dorado. It's our mesquite-smoked single malt. But the first thing I did to just learn how to make a single malt whiskey was what we now call our classic. It's unsmoked. We still have those are our two core whiskeys that we have all the time. We do about 5 or 6 special releases, 3 of which are regular annual releases, and 2 or 3 of the others are what we call our distillers cuts. They're one-offs. They give a chance for our master distiller Mark Viertaler to really play and create and blend and stuff. So those are always really fun. And then we have a rye that we bring in from a distillery in Indiana. So we don't make that, but we let that sit in ex Dorado barrels to take on a little bit of that desert character, because that's what we're all about is the desert, and so that our Sentinel Straight Rye is that product.
Okay, and I have a bottle of that at home. I didn't realize. I was wondering. I was going to ask you about the rye because that seemed like not an odd, but just a sort of a different crop to be working with. But I'm curious about these distiller cuts. So how long does it take from when you first start the process to when I've got something I can put in a glass and drink?
For the distiller's cuts, so I'm going to say about 17, 18 months to make the whiskey and then mature it. And then for the distiller's cuts, those will sit in the finishing barrels for anywhere from like a year to 3 years.
Oh my gosh! So that like the classic and the Dorado, those staples, you've got a formula and a recipe, and that you can crank out, so to speak. But these distiller cuts, if you're playing around with that, I mean, at what point? It seems like you could get months into this thing and realize, oh, this doesn't taste very good. Like, is it fixable? Like, how does he know how to do that?
Well, that's the fun part. And so, first of all, Mark has a pretty good idea of what's going to come, of how the finishing cask is going to affect the whiskey, what kind of flavors it's going to give. And there's always surprises. Our distiller, Mark, has a good idea of what flavors the special casks are going to impart to the whiskey. So we've done, port casks, we've done sherry casks, Sauterne, cognac cask, lots of different things. So we, or Mark, know pretty well what those are going to do to the whiskey. And then, do we have surprises? Sure. Usually they're good surprises.
Okay.
But if there's something that doesn't taste quite up to what what he would want to bottle, he can do a little blending. He'll add a little of the Dorado in. He'll put a little bit of the the Sauterne cask, whatever. So these are always really fun. They're very creative, and they're just a fun part of our whiskey lineup.
Is Mark, is he the decision maker as to when something is ready to go, or is there like a committee that has to sample it? And he does make the final decision, but the good thing about Mark is he wants lots of input. And so we'll have, when that process is happening, he'll have glasses set out for everybody and put a notice out and say, hey, you guys, and he'll have pencil and paper in front of each glass and, ask for all of our input. And so that's so vicariously, that's really fun for us too. I mean, it's helps us maybe contribute to the creativity, but Mark's the one doing it. I would imagine over the years your palate has become a little bit more sophisticated in addressing some of these undertones.
It is. I've learned a lot. A lot of that is trying to, identify flavors and aromas, because it's both. It's both things. Mm-hmm. First your nose, then your palate, and so a lot of it is. The ability to, and I'm not great at it. I'm not, and some of it is learning the vocabulary of what potential flavors you are experiencing. Okay. And one thing I've realized recently is that, and I heard somebody say, well, this guy is really, he relies on his nose, and this guy relies on his palate. And I realized, oh, that's crazy, because I rely more on my nose. And so palate's important too, but it's funny how different people kind of have different influences.
Yeah, I've always, I think I'm more of a palate person, but I've never quite gotten the nasal piece of it. But I'm probably not doing it right. I need more practice. That's what I need.
Well, come on over.
We can
do a workshop.
I'm just trying to work myself into those. Well, speaking of workshops, you do a lot of events at your spot, right? You've got tours. I know I've taken a tour. I don't know if that was part of a special event or not, but it was great to get a flow of how everything goes from start to finish.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we do regular tours and tastings almost every day of the week. I think maybe Mondays we don't, but people can go on our website and sign up for those. They're really fun. We have fabulous tour guides, really fun, a lot of different characters. And then, we do a lot of events at the distillery. We're doing Friday night happy hours. We've had this series, and we always have music for those. We've been doing this series of talks called Armchair Anthropology, where we have anthropologists and archaeologists come in and speak on their area of study. Those have been really well attended and fun. We're having a Distillers Cut release on June 12th. We're having a Tucson foodie party for Tucson Foodie on June 27th. We're having a Women in Whiskey event at the distillery. We're going to celebrate Tucson's birthday in August. And then we do a lot of things out of the distillery too, a lot of events for, organizations. And we support a lot of nonprofits and environmental groups.
Your Whiskey Del Bac's name is everywhere, not just, in the bars where they're serving it, but I've seen you at a lot of different events and some interesting pairings with different restaurants and things of that nature. Definitely a name that is, if you're familiar with the Tucson scene, I mean, it's not an uncommon name.
Yeah.
Where did the name come from, though?
Well, that was actually my wife's idea as well. So we wanted to express where we're from, and so my wife said, "Why don't we brand ourselves after Mission San Javier del Bac?" For anybody that doesn't happen to know what San Javier del Bac means. Del is Spanish for of the, and a bac is the Tohono O'odham word for where there's surface water along the normally dry Santa Cruz River. And so San Javier del Bac means the mission itself. It means Saint Xavier of the place where the river reappears in the sand. That's how it was translated to us. And so Whiskey Del Bac. I've always loved living in a border region because the blend of cultures makes you look at the world in different ways, and it's so enriching. And so after we branded, I realized that our name is trilingual. So Whiskey Del Bac, which I just in my mind, I love that little.
And I like it, just sort of this a little oasis as the water just appears above the desert, which brings me back to my wet my whistle there. With your.
There were two places. In the upstream on the Santa Cruz, it is a perennial flow by the border. It runs south to north,
it's fine.
But down here, there were only two places where there was surface water. One was where the mission was founded, so there was a bac there. The other one was right underneath Sentinel Peak, which is a mountain, and that's why there was a village here predating a lot of villages predating, Western people settling. So those were the two places where there were surface water.
And speaking of water, I'm assuming that's a component of your process. Is that do you do anything special with the water, or is it locally sourced? Is it?
We use our municipal water up until so during the production process, we use our municipal water. We do have to get rid of the chlorine. We have carbon filters that do that. But the yeast actually loves the minerals in our water. They're actual nutrients for the yeast. So that's a benefit. Once it's our whiskey, though, once it goes into the barrel, we're going to proof it down using reverse osmosis water, and then again when we bottle it, we proof it down again, and we'll use RO water for that as well.
Okay. Yeah. So I mean, for the most part, the origins of this are very regional. Now you have to go to Colorado to get the base product, but the wood and the wall, the things that are doing this, you are really consciously using what's right around you.
Yeah. When you were talking about the various things we do with different organizations, the sense of community here in Tucson is one of the special things, as you well know, about this place. And it's just such a great, we do a lot of collaborations with different purveyors. We love supporting local causes. And just the level of community in Tucson makes it really fun to live here. It's just a cool thing.
I agree. There are a lot of collaborations, and I appreciate when people get ideas and then follow through with those and bring it to a point where I'm sure neither of you on that evening when you were sitting there drinking your scotch imagined that this would be the outcome.
No idea.
I appreciate what you do. We'll link to a lot of your social media. We'll put the website up so people can find you and learn more about it. And hopefully we can have you back at some point and talk about what's the future of Del Bac.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks so much for having me. This was fun.